Hello everybody, it's Sarah and welcome to my first video of 2022. Also, very sorry for not uploading the past 1.5 weeks. I was on vacation and before that the Christmas time was too stressful for me to pre-film, so I didn't have any videos to upload. But now I am back. We're gonna start it's a new year. Let's move right into it by talking about the past year, obviously. How else? Also, I'm not gonna have a December wrap-up for you this month because actually after my mid-month wrap-up, I only read one book and that one was a reread. It was a reread of The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue. And so, yeah, I just don't feel like doing a wrap-up simply for one reread. So that's that, and now moving on to today's video, which is going to be me talking about my stats as well as if I achieved the reading goals and channel goals that I set myself at the beginning of 2021. It's obviously the first of my year-end videos. Once all of this is done, I will have a playlist of all of the videos, which includes my best books, my worst books. I'm gonna do one of my favorite series probably this year and also one for my favorite rereads because I did reread a lot this year. And so once all of those videos are done, I will have a playlist and I will leave the playlist link down below and up there. But this is the first video, so obviously it's not there yet if you're watching this video as it comes out, that is. But that was it for a very long introduction, so let's move right into the video finally. I will start with my reading stats. Then I will go over my reading and channel goals that I had for 2021 and tell you which of those I managed and which I didn't manage. And lastly, I will go through my 2021 backlist TBR and tell you which of those books I read and which I didn't read. And yeah, let's move into it. So let's, as always, start with the basic stats. I read a total of 203 books this year, which is the most books that I have ever read in a year. And first of all, as always, like no matter how many or how little books you read in a year, everything is valid as long as you have fun. But for me, I have talked about this a lot by now. First of all, I don't get how I read this many books because I never used to be able to read these many books and I'm kind of scared of myself, not gonna lie, just gotta be completely honest on that. But also for me personally, it was a bit too many books read this year because, you know, the solid middle ground of the books that I read this year just kind of, I forgot about a lot of them. And I'm already starting to forget some of the 5-star reads that I read them this year because there have been so many books in between that it feels like I read them years ago. So yeah, I'm just not happy with the amount of books I read. I don't like reading this much. But anyway, 203 books split between 143 new reads, so books that I read for the first time, and 60 rereads. Also, I'm going to be looking down a lot, as you probably already noticed because I have all my stats on my phone. And then in total, that was just over 93,000 pages. The 93,000 split over 203 books means that the average book for me this year was a length of about 460 pages, which, you know, is a good length in my opinion. It also makes sense since I do read a lot of adult high fantasy, which tends to be 500 pages and above. But then I also read a lot of novellas this year, more than I usually do. And, you know, I read some YA in between and so on. So 460 pages per book, and then also that makes for 255 pages per day, which, gotta be honest, once again, I don't know where I found the time because I started my master's in anthropology and then also I started a second master, so a third studies thing this October, this autumn. So yeah, I should not have the time to read as much as I do, is what I'm saying. So now moving on to my best and my worst reading months in terms of books read. My best month was February with 28 books, so a book per day, and my worst reading month was December, in which I only read 5 books. Then in terms of pages, my best reading month was October, in which I almost read 11,600 pages, and my worst reading month once again was December, with just over 2,200 pages read. And then in terms of pages per day, my best reading month once again was February, in which I almost read 400 pages per day, 383 to be precise, which, I mean, it makes sense because February I do have like vacation holidays. We don't have uni in February, so I did have time there. And then once again, December was my worst month with 72 pages read per day, which I still don't think is that bad, to be honest. Let's go on to average page lengths. The like interval of pages where I read the most books this year was between 400 and 499 pages. In that interval, I read 53 books, which is 26% of all the books that I read this year. After that, we have the interval of 300 to 399 pages, which was 32 books or 16%. And after that, we have 500 to 599 pages, which was 28 books or 14%. Then I did not read any books this year that were under 100 pages. However, I did read 5 books this year that were over 1,000 pages, which made 2% of the books that I read this year. Page-wise, probably more than 2%, let's be honest, but you know, books-wise, that was 2%. Also, I know that was like my 3 rereads, or 3 of the rereads from the Stormlight Archive series. It was the longest book that I'll get to in a second, and then I believe one of Ken Liu's books was also over 1K pages. So I think those were the books that made up those 5 books. Then in terms of the longest and the shortest book I read this year, the longest book I read this year was 1001 Nights, which technically is 2 books, but the page numbers go continuously through the 2 volumes, so you know, it doesn't start with page 1 in the second volume, so I just decided to count it as 1 book. And this one was, where do I have the number, 1,857 pages. And then the shortest book I read this year was Fireheart Tiger by Aliette de Bodard with 103 pages. Now let's look at how I split my reads between the age brackets. Firstly, obviously, most of the books I read this year were adult, a total of 167 books, in fact, which is 82% of the books that I read this year. Then I read 28 or 14% of YA novels and 8 or 4% of middle grade novels. And I did not read any children's books this year. In terms of genres, it will come to no one's surprise that my most read genre is high fantasy, which is 54% or 109 books read this year. Then I have 38 books or 19% that were split between other fantasy genres, mostly urban and historical fantasy. Then my third most read category was classics and modern classics, which was 20 books or 10%. And then the last one, where I read enough books to warrant mentioning, meaning more than 1 or 2 books, was retellings with 8 books or 4%. And then the other genres I read this year, where I just didn't read enough books to warrant mentioning how many books I read or how much percent it is, because again, it's just mostly 1 or 2 books, is literary fiction, speculative literary fiction, horror, thriller, science fiction, mostly space opera, historical fiction, post-apocalyptic novels, and also mysteries. Or 1 mystery, I guess. Maybe 2, I don't remember. Then next, I obviously at the beginning of 2021 decided not to rate books, because usually I don't find it helpful unless it's a 1-star or a 5-star, so I only decided to rate 5 stars this year, so that's the only ratings I can give you this year. And in total I had 13 5-stars, which came out to a total of 9% of the books that I read for the first time this year, because in my star ratings I didn't count any of the books that I reread, because a lot of those obviously were 5 stars as well, because I mostly reread favorites. And so yes, moving on to series. I have already talked about those numbers in my series videos, which I will leave linked down below and up there. I made a video on all my unfinished series and one on all my finished series. And I said that the numbers would probably change. They didn't change because I haven't read since I made those videos. But anyway, at the beginning of the year, I had 13 series that I was currently in the middle of, as in I hadn't caught up to the series or I wasn't finished with the series. At the end of the year, I now have 16 ongoing series. Then I had 18 series at the beginning of the year that I was caught up on, and 25 series that I'm caught up on now. I had 45 finished series at the beginning of the year and 59 finished series now. 5 DNF'd series at the beginning of the year and 9 DNF'd series now. So next and last few categories I'm only talking about the books that were new to me, and we're kind of sparring out my rereads for different reasons, but mostly for these categories I find it more helpful to just look at the books that were new to me. First, let's look at the gender of the author. I had 60 books that I read this year that were written by male authors. That makes 42%. To no one's surprise, I mostly read women, so I had 76 books this year that were written by female authors, only 5 books that were written by non-binary or genderqueer authors, so 3%. I definitely want to improve that number in 2022. And then 4 books, or 3% of the books that I read this year, or the new to me books that I read this year, that were written by authors of 2 or more genders. Like, they were written by multiple authors and those authors did not have the same gender. That is what I want to say. Next, let's talk about where the authors I read books from this year came from. To no one's surprise, once again, most of the books I read this year, or last year, once again, I need to get used to saying last year, but most of the books I read last year were from authors from the US and the UK. It's just what we usually are recommended most in the Booksternet sphere generally. So again, not really a big surprise, but 109 books, or 76% of the books that I read in 2021 were from authors from the US or the UK. Then I had 12 books, or 8%, by Austrian or German authors, which actually makes me really happy because I do want to read a little bit more of, you know, my native literature, I guess I could say. Then 5 books, or 4%, were from authors from Australia or New Zealand. Then I had 4 books, or 3%, from authors from Western Europe, which I think was only France, really. I don't remember if I read any Southern European books, but I believe it was only France, I'm pretty sure. And then, sadly, only 12 books, or 8%, were by authors that were not from the generally Western sphere of the world. So authors from Africa, Eastern Asia, Southern Asia, the Middle East, South America, also indigenous authors, which were indigenous authors from North America, but I just wanted to count them separately, and then also the Caribbean. So I do want to improve that number. However, the numbers look way better when I look at my stats of BIPOC authors versus white authors, and I have 2 ways to split this right now. Firstly, I read 50 books this year by BIPOC authors, which makes a total of 35% of the new to me books that I read this year, so just a little bit above a third. And then I read 92 books, or 65%, that were written by white authors. However, I do think my numbers look actually better because I did have my TBR 0 project this year, and so I quote-unquote had to read a lot of books by white authors, because for my physical TBR, the BIPOC authors were the first ones to go. So if I count away the 29 books that I still read for my TBR 0 project, the numbers actually look a lot better, and I think those numbers are probably the ones that will be representative for this year as well, although I'll still try to improve them. And so if I count away the 29 books, we're only at 63 books read by white authors, or 56%, so just over half of the books that I read this year. And then still 50 books read by BIPOC authors, which now makes 44%, which obviously I still want to improve on that because it's like one group white authors, but BIPOC authors aren't one group because you have black authors, you have indigenous authors, you have Hispanic authors, you have Latinx authors, you have Asian authors, you know, Eastern Asian, Southern Asian, Middle Eastern authors. So, you know, BIPOC is not a homogenous group, is basically what I'm saying. So I do want to try and push that number to over 50%, hopefully in 2022. And I need to change my battery because it's blinking. So it is now quite a bit later because I did not find my backup battery, and so I had to charge the one that was in my camera and obviously could not continue filming. But we have one last round of stats left before we can get into my reading goals. And the last round of stats I want to talk about is the representation in the books that I read. And for that I am talking, first of all, only main characters. I do not even count it if a main side character is queer, marginalized, has a disability whatsoever. I only count the main characters, and the only exception to that rule is if I know that the author belongs to a marginalized community. So with that in mind, I had 48 books that I read this year, or 34%, where there was no rep whatsoever, so not the author nor any of the main characters. And I didn't write down the split up of the different representations, but most of the rep that I read this year was either race related or LGBT related, or a combo of the two. That was like the main group. And then sadly I only had 3%, I think a total of 5 books or something, that had rep in the main characters that were related to mental illness or disability. So that is definitely one of the representations, I don't know what to call it, you know, that's one of the markers in a book that I will look out for more in 2022, because I'm just not happy with where I am there right now. By now, books by marginalized authors as concerns queerness, and especially black authors, but also other BIPOC authors or BIPOC rep, it's pretty automatic, where I'm like at a 50-50 between no representation and that representation. But you know, there's definitely marginalizations that I need to look out for more. Also, in terms of queerness, of course, I have more representation in the books that I read in terms of sexuality rather than in terms of gender representation. But yeah, that was it for the last statistic, and now let's move into my reading and channel goals and whether I managed to hit them. First, I wanted to read 60 books in 2022, and those 60 books I wanted to be books that are new to me. I obviously read 203 books in total and 143 books that were new to me, so definitely hit that goal. Hit it twice over, 3 times over even if you count the rereads. Then I wanted to do lots of rereads. Yes, I definitely did a lot of rereads. I think I read a total of 5 or 6 series. I don't remember, but there were a lot of rereads. Then I wanted to read more adult fantasy written by women and genderqueer authors. Yes, I definitely did that. I didn't do it for 2021, but I definitely for 2022 want a separate gender breakdown of authors just for high fantasy, because you know, I just want to see how well I'm doing with that goal, is basically what I'm saying. Then I wanted to read more international books and more international fantasy, and I kind of managed that, in that I definitely read more non-US books or US-UK books than I read in 2020 and the previous years before that, but I'm still probably not at a number where I'm happy to be, so I definitely still have room to improve there. Then my TBR jars. First, my physical TBR jar, I had the goal to get to a TBR 0, and I definitely managed that, or managed the way I wanted to manage it. Wait a second, I need to look for some books here. So my TBR 0 was I did not want to own any unread books that I owned previously to 2021, and I basically managed that. I have 2 books left. The first is this Grimm's Fairy Tales, where I'm currently halfway through, so I'm currently reading this, and I'm sure I'll be done with it soon. And then the second book that I owned previously to 2022, which was a 2020 Christmas present, was this poetry collection by, about, and for women. So yeah, I still need to read that, and that is definitely gonna be a reading project for 2022. Did I say I got it for Christmas 2022? I got it for Christmas 2020. But I'm also not too fussed that I haven't read this yet, so I'm still gonna count my TBR 0 challenge as checked, and I managed it. Then my series TBR chart, I just normally continued with it, and I did manage to continue with one series a month, so I did do well with that. And my general TBR chart, that one not so much. My general TBR chart was my TBR chart where I put in all of my Goodreads TBR, the TBR that I usually forget that I have, the books that I just, you know, mark as one to read because they sound interesting to me, but then not a lot of people talk about it, so I forget I have it on my TBR. And so yeah, I read a few books from the TBR chart, but not every month, definitely. Then for my channel goals, I wanted to do an international fantasy video. I did read most of the books that I had on my TBR for that video. Have not filmed that video yet. That will come probably within the next few months, hopefully. Fingers crossed. And I also wanted to possibly do an international fantasy readathon. Did not do that. Haven't really planned one for 2022 either. Then I wanted to focus my channel a lot more. I wanted to do more of my Let's Talk Culture and Fantasy video, which I think I filmed a total of 2 or 3 of those videos in 2021. So yeah, could probably do better there. I did do some videos, but there were also a lot of videos that I had planned that I then never ended up filming. And then in terms of reading more adult high fantasy by women and genderqueer folks, definitely did that. And I wanted to review every single one of the books that I read by a woman or by someone who is genderqueer. And I think I did that for most. There's still my December book club book that I don't know where it is, that I have left to film a review for. That's gonna come soon, probably after I finish this, you know, year-end series. And then aside from that, there's a few books that I haven't reviewed that, but the reason for that is because I want to do a series review once I'm done with all of the books. I have not filmed a review after my reread of The Black Jewels by Anne Bishop yet, and I haven't filmed a review for the Traitor Spy series, but that was kind of a conscious decision because it's a sequel series, and I'll probably get like 8 views on it, and I don't want to bother. That's basically it. But aside from that, I pretty much reviewed all of the books by women and genderqueer folks. And in terms of my book club, I wanted to be a lot more active on the Discord. Did not really manage that. However, it is currently getting a lot more active with the readathon starting, not readathon, read-along starting for The Ruin of Kings. I started the book today and I'm so excited, and it makes me so excited to see so many people excited to start the series, and it's a lot of fun. So kind of managed that goal. And now lastly, let's talk about which books I read from the TBR that I set myself at the beginning of 2021. First, I wanted to finish The Wheel of Time. I did finish The Wheel of Time. The second one was I wanted to start the first Law series with The Blade itself and then possibly continue on. I read the first Law trilogy. I have not yet continued on with the standalones as well as with the second trilogy. However, since I did finish the original First Law, I'm still gonna count this as a win. The third one was I finally wanted to do a proper reread of the Cosmere, starting with the first book with all the novellas in the proper places. And I did almost finish that. There's 2 books that I have left. I have left, what was it, Dawn Shard, which was the latest novella, and I still have not reread Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, I just lost some steam on my reread because of reasons. But I will wait until my copy of Dawnchart comes in, and then I will finally reread this, because damn it, I don't want to fail this. But I reread all the other like over 20 books, so I'm still gonna count it as a win. I also wanted to read for the first time all books by Brandon Sanderson, so that I can say at the end of this year that I have read all the books. Specifically, I wanted to read The Rhythmist, and I have finished all of the Alcatraz books, and I have decided not to read The Rhythmist because I'm not interested whatsoever. And after my reread of The Cosmere, I don't count Brandon Sanderson as a favorite author anymore, to the point where I want to have read everything that he has written. So yeah, I didn't read The Rhythmist, but I don't care because I don't want to read it anymore either. I wanted to read 1001 Nights, and as you have seen in my stats, I did do that. I wanted to read The Sword of Kaigan. I did read The Sword of Kaigan. I wanted to get started and possibly continue in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series by Marie Brennan. I read the first 2 books and I am ready to get started on the 3rd one. And then after that there's 2 more left, but I'm also still gonna count this as a win because, as I said, I only intended to start this series, not finish it. And lastly, there was some rereads I planned. First, I planned to reread the Black Magicians trilogy by Trudy Canavan. Did reread this trilogy. I planned to reread The Chronicles of the Emerged World by Nichia Troisi. Did not reread this trilogy. I also did not continue on with my reread of the Inkheart trilogy. I reread the first book in 2020. I wanted to finish my reread in 2021. I dragged it into 2022. It is what it is. I wanted to do a general reread of Juliette Maralier's books and then also continue on with some of her newer releases, or well, at this point no longer new releases, but you know, books that I hadn't read yet by her. And I only reread the first book in the Seven Watchers series, which is Daughter of the Forest. I wanted to reread the Tura Lane trilogy by Anne Bishop. I did reread this trilogy. I wanted to reread the Ephemera series by Anne Bishop as well, and I only started on this reread. I read the first book, Sebastian. I still have to read book 2 and 3. I wanted to reread the Cushiel's Dart trilogy by Jacqueline Carey. I reread the first 2 books, got started on my reread of the 3rd book, and then my very much reading slump of December of 2021 hit me, so I still need to finish my reread of the 3rd book. And then the last reread I wanted to do was I wanted to reread both the Demon Child trilogy as well as the Hydron Chronicles by Jennifer Fallon, and I did reread both trilogies. And yeah, that was it for this video. It's probably very long, so I will keep the end very short. Just ask you how you did with your reading goals for 2021. Are there any things you want to change going into 2022? Leave all of that in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will also be left linked down below, so go and check those out as well. The Discord for that book club is also the place where we're reading, or where I'm hosting the read-along for The Ruin of Kings for A Chorus of Dragons by Chen Lyons. So if you're still interested in joining, check it out. Also for the book club, the buddy read this month is Jade War, so the 2nd book in the Greenbone saga by, oh my god, who was it? Fonda Lee, that was it. Anyway, that was all I had to say for this video, and I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!